Welcome to a radical discussion of independence, free will, liberty, and the left-hand path. This is Damonosophy 2.0 with your host, Paul Frederick.
Kazimierza. Skąd się wzięła ta miłość do Kazimierza? No vision and grasp.
Hello, friends and fellow Damons, and welcome to another episode of Damonosophy 2.0, the only podcast fighting for liberty and the left-hand path. My guest today is Mr. D. Sharpe.
How about those titles?
And also, as everyone knows these days, it seems like all the great left-hand path magicians are also left-hand path musicians. And so,
Right.
D. Sharpe is also in the band End-Time Illusion, Dead by Wednesday, and Dave Sharpe and the Solar Power.
That's right.
Pretty
Trifecta.
intense.
Yeah, it's excellent.
So cue everyone in here. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about, how did you find the left-hand path?
Well, first I was thinking when I said hello, I should probably say aloha, because the last time we met was at the break at Kahalu, Big Island, Hawaii.
Oh my God, that's right.
So I just wanted to kind of throw us back to that real quick.
No, I should have mentioned that. That's a very important aspect of this whole thing, is that D. Sharpe and I have been surfing together on the big waves in Kona, right?
That's right.
It's pretty hellish.
That's right. Like Poseidon of Thebes, killing it in Panthalasia.
Oh my God. So that's all I can think about now. All I can think about now is, eating waves. Eating waves
right.
and paddling desperately so I don't get, dashed into the black volcanic rock.
That's right. And interestingly enough, you think about that, we left, and within a month, the island's been consumed with lava and fire. So we'll leave it at that.
It's so bizarre, man. It's so bizarre. And appropriate.
So hopefully everyone's all safe. Yeah.
So there was this big mystery. There was this big mystery on the island. Now we're talking about the island. So let's just get right into this. I kept seeing these pictures, these paintings on the island that would have, it's like a painting, it's like a landscape painting at night. And there's a moon, and there's ocean water, and there's volcanic lava flowing all over everything. And I saw like 5 or 6 paintings, a hotel, different places of this. And so, I don't know, that's just the image I have, like going away from that whole experience. It's like moonlight, water, and lava.
Yeah, it was very mesmerizing. And another interesting point there is the presentation that I did was on Lunar Magic, which, we could probably touch on at some point later on in our conversation. But yes, those paintings certainly resonated with me and my work, and I think the group that we had there, for sure.
Well, definitely. Well, let's get into it. Tell me about Lunar Magic.
Yeah, so last few years I've been actually, my whole life. You mentioned, how did I get into this? I think, when you're a young child, you look up at the sky, you get outside, and you're just a little mesmerized by these the stars, the sun, the moon, and you haven't really been told, the scientific aspects yet. So you're not really clouded with just academic research or so-called. So it's still a mystery for you. So as a young child, I thought about what's this mysterion, which I guess I use more of the Hellenistic term for mystery here, but that there's something else going on outside of what we get taught in our textbooks and whatnot. There's like another dimensional aspect, but the moon's always held a lot of mystery with me, not only because of the regulation of cycles and things like that, but it's the closest neighbor, but it seems like it's something that we know the least about. And being a very, very, very amateur astronomer, looking at the night sky, seeing some anomalies on the moon. So that kind of led to just, winding down at night and watching some like conspiracy theory videos and things like that, like what's possibly going on and what's the origin of the moon. So I decided to, spend a little bit of time doing some more academic research myself, but then trying to find out like what is that resonance with the moon to myself, and trying to decode a couple of dreams I had when I was, maybe around 4 or 5 that really spoke to me about the moon. So what I came as a conclusion of a long meditation was that I'd always kind of resonated this female aspect, resonance with the moon, kind of more like a Luna. But this meditation I had, I actually kind of had this vision of Kanzu, which is the Egyptian male deity of the moon. So I started a project which I call the Kanzu satellite. And what the work that came out of that was essentially, the moon being a traveler. How does that work in relation to us? What's an analogy to our own initiations and work? And what I came to conclude was my work with investigating consciousness and the root of consciousness, and even looking into like what, David Chalmers would call the hard problem. Where is consciousness rooted? I came up with like a model for my own lunar magic where the satellite, like the moon and earth relation, is really consciousness evolving around our own body, right? So we typically think of consciousness as being embedded within us. Yet on the other hand, we say, well, if the meat machine were to perish, my consciousness could live on in some type of deification form. Like we might have that choice if we're, mentally strong enough. So if that's the case, can we detach our consciousness, and how does that consciousness look in a model form? And to me, it's kind of like the satellite that's outside the scope of just our flesh and body, but yet connected intrinsically to our thoughts and our actions and how we govern ourselves. And the watchword that I came up with when I was doing this work was governance, right? Mm-hmm. And you think if we go back to, the reality of what the calendar would really look like outside of this Gregorian calendar that got, kind of messed up with the perfect 12 months and, days that you can never, it's kind of a confusing calendar, right? You got 30 days or 31 days. The days of the week are never perfectly at each day, each month, right? But if you looked at the moon, it's really, you got a 28-day cycle, give or take. Things have been skewed a little bit over the years as the moon kind of, moves a little bit away each year. But technically, you could have 4 7-day weeks. Thursday is always going to be a Thursday, and you get 13 months. And you got to wonder if it's people are afraid of the number 13. Is that why we went back to a 12-month or made this 12-month calendar? So things got to skew. But if you really look at a governing factor, you could have, 4 7-day weeks, 13 months, and it would kind of be more of a perfect assembly. And then, maybe you have to have this leap year where you add a day to even things out every few years, right? But really, it's a governance. So my work was basically looking at taking the front side face of how we appear to others, and then also this dark side, right? Because the weird thing about the moon, also an anomaly, is that it's always facing one side, but we have dark aspects of ourselves, these magical aspects that people really don't know about or ever see, and we're constantly seeking mystery to find out about ourselves and unlock this dark side. So that was kind of the basis of, or the thesis of my work here, is that this governing factor of consciousness and how we have front-facing masks that we wear in our day-to-day lives, but we also have this dark side that's mysterious that people really don't see, and even ourselves we're trying to uncover.
Right. So, I mean, there's like so much mythology and esoteric knowledge that places the moon in this significant role, not only with consciousness, but also, like you said, with mystery and stuff. So have you heard that Elon Musk is like with SpaceX, they're like announcing like the first passenger ship to the moon? And he took like some Japanese guy bought into it. He's the first guy who's going to take the passenger ship to the moon if the project comes into being. Have you heard about that?
Right.
Yeah.
I have. I think it's great to get outside of a government agency having to basically run a space program because, you're not really getting, as far as I can tell, a straight answer from, say, NASA,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's funded by the government. They're taking our tax money, so we should really be in the know. And I personally feel that's probably why we're moving away from something like NASA, because now if they go to a government agency, they can kind of restrict what's going on behind the scenes. So for a public agency or private entity that's a corporation to be able to do that type of work, I think is excellent. I have my apprehension about getting past, say, the Van Allen belt and radiation, solar flares and things like that. Just human beings aren't meant to probably be in that space, obviously, and it's even though we have maybe lead or things like that we can encase in our vehicles, I'm not so sure that the type of rocketry that we have is proficient to do that type of work. I guess I'm kind of a naysayer that we've actually been to the moon as that humans have been to the moon. I believe we've probably sent orbiters up there, but that's a whole other discussion, I guess, for a conspiracy podcast, I suppose.
Yeah, so I mean that was going to be my next question. I mean that's what everything hinges on here as far as like Elon Musk going to the moon. The big question is, have we been there before? Really,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it could really go either way. I mean, there's really not conclusive proof either way. I do believe that we have orbiter pictures, a lot of those which have been kind of skewed or hidden from the public. If you look at the Russian orbiter Zond, they got the first pictures of the dark side of the moon in the mid 60s, and you can see evidence of a lot of anomalies on that side. There's like what we call a Tower of Babel, like miles high towers and things like that. And that just goes back to what's the origin here. So when I was doing my work, what I actually did was I broke down this work into some different categories using the word daemon. I broke it down into like, Diaz design, what are the peculiarities of the moon's placement, the exact distance from the Earth, that we can actually have, we can block the sun and things like that. It's just a very, very strange that it's placed where it is. You got neptunium, titanium, uranium, these elements that have supposedly been collected from the moon that just don't seem natural, but actually seem natural to the work of different type of manufacturing plantations or nuclear fission and things like that. So that's very odd. And then anomalies. There's just so many anomalies. That's kind of the fun stuff when you look at pictures of the moon, like possible structures. You say there's craters, but if you look at what these craters are, the width of the crater and the depth don't really match like a meteor impact. It's not like a perfect circle or anything. So you kind of wonder, there's a lot of tunnels and things like that going on. If you really look at some of the prints, I for influence, what's the influence that the moon has on us? People talk about the documented case of the crazies. It's, the data out there is a little bit skewed. It's not as bad as everybody thinks that, there's all these births and people are doing crazy stuff, but there are obviously menstrual cycles and things like that. The waves pick up. So there's some type of influence. And then it could be all, the whole system of magic that you can place around, the moon. It's really in the eye of the beholder, the waxing and waning of your will, love, compassion, or destruction. What's your objective in your work? It's an illumination of basically your inner daemon. And then origin, there's a book that came out in the early 70s that maybe the moon was actually brought here, or it's like a alien spacecraft. I mean, it sounds a little far-fetched, but they talk about when they dropped things on the moon, it rang like a bell. So is it hollow? Is that the case? If that's the case, can is it built for protection to be able to travel in the sky, and like there's some inner type of base there? Who knows? It's just more science fiction kind of fantasy kind of entertainment, if you will.
Well, that gets into now you're getting into hollow Earth theory, because see that's one of the things I saw about hollow Earth theory is that which I hadn't considered before. I'd come into contact with hollow Earth theory many years ago. I think in the book Morning of the Magicians. I thought, well, that's like fucking fascinating. But then I saw recently, it's like, so this theory is expanded to like all of the planets in the solar system. Like all the planets and moons are probably hollow also, and this just has to do with the design of them, or the
Right.
evolution, just how these bodies like appear, is that like, hollowness naturally appears within them. But I mean, well, A, that would explain why it rings like a bell when you drop something on the moon. But
Right.
B, it also could explain like where other civilizations could be throughout the solar system, even though we don't see them on the surface.
Right. So just because we, have this carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen base, and we need the sun and fresh air and this, that, or the other, does not necessarily mean that other life needs that. I mean, if you go 50 miles underneath the ocean, you can find these glow in the dark, elemental fish that feed off the bottom and they can live in compression and things like that. So life's pretty profound and dynamic that it can kind of live anywhere, right? I mean, even when we see cut into meteors, you can see cells on them and things like that. And that discussion came up recently with all the oddness going on in Antarctica. And I mean, if you think about it, even you go down, what is it, 70 feet or so into the Earth, it's always 55 degrees. So they have Old Newgate Prison up in East Granby, Connecticut, where they used to put the prisoners underground. They could stay there all winter because it was 55 degrees. I remember taking field trips there, and so that kind of like makes you think, okay, you can live in under the earth. And there's somewhere in Europe where there's like a whole network of tunnels where like it can fit 30,000 people. So it's not such a obscure thought.
No, you see things like that, and you're like, well, that's not so far fetched because the possibility is there. And I think one of the problems, though, is you mentioned, the government version of the lunar landing and stuff like that. And one of the problems is that enough like discrepancies come out about the official story on things, and then suddenly no one knows what to believe. Right? No one knows who to take seriously anymore, or what is the actual authority on it. And so I think that's like kind of opening up all sorts of like alternative ideas and theories about things because, well, people just don't actually trust the so-called authority on it anymore.
Right. I think NASA's technically, it stands for never a straight answer or something to that degree, right?
Right. And what would put these things, it's like the human desire, and entrepreneurialism, and the human desire to go out and just find out and achieve these things. It's like people always say, well, one of the conspiracy questions about the moon is like, well, why did we never go back again? And that's a big question, why we never went back again when we, suddenly just did it, flew like 3 missions, within a small period of years, and then never again. And then the answer is like, well, there hasn't been a need to do it, or we put the funds into something else. And it's like, there hasn't been. Oh, no, there's huge interest in it. If this had just opened up, and that's what I think, what it looks like with Elon Musk, is that there is a human interest in going there just because people want to
Sure.
know. Because people want to know.
Right.
You know?
Right. Even from an entertainment value, just to go up there. I mean, it
Right.
is interesting when you look at technology from the industrial age forward, how far we've come. And, you look at the combustion engine, and, we were flying B-52 bombers in the 40s, and then we go to the moon in 1969. Yet 50 years later, we have all these failed rocket attempts. So it's, we've digressed in that field. I mean, it's hard to believe. I mean, we got phones where you can Skype people from the middle of the woods, and yet the technology on board the rockets going to the moon were not even cell phone capable. As far as the technology back then. I mean, it had the processing power probably of a flip phone. So okay,
Right.
and that's where I start to kind of question things there. It's you're going to drop this the LEM on the moon, and then you're going to project up and catch orbiter going 4,000 miles an hour and connect back to that and then get back to Earth. It seems a little outrageous to me, but hey, that's just me.
Yeah. And did I tell you I saw a rocket recently?
No.
So I was in Florida about a month ago, for work, and I was hanging out I was staying in a hotel that was on the beachfront, like just right by like Cocoa Beach, right?
Okay.
It's just down the road from Cape Canaveral, yeah, from Cape Canaveral.
Okay.
And there was a rocket went off. It was a SpaceX project, and I can't remember where. It wasn't the one going to the sun. He shot up one that was going to the sun like a few days later. And this was before that. I can't remember where. I think it's going way out into deep space or something. And I saw it, like I could see it from the beach, and it went off at like 1 o'clock in the morning. So I sat out there on the beach by myself and watched this rocket like go up. And it's pretty far away, but I could see like the glare, and I saw it go up into the clouds. And I tell you, it's like it just, seeing something like that is so incredible. It just,
right.
It just stirs the soul, and it's like it restores your faith. It restores your faith in the assertion that we can do something like that man can accomplish something like that. Man can go into space. We can shoot things up into space. It can happen, And so,
right, and that, yeah, and that really shows the, adeptness of the non-natural aspects of our work, right? That we're not tied down to the natural world. And it really goes with the left-hand path work, is that we can create rockets, we can create biospheres, we can orbit the Earth and these modules and live on our own terms, kind of against the natural order. And I think that's very much a facet of the gift that we have to create these alternate realities for ourselves and not be pinned down to just this innate survival skill.
Right, an innate survival skill and a list of everything that you can and can't do that's already been determined by a team of experts. But I mean, and yeah, the gift of set. That's what I saw. Like seeing this rocket going up into the air. It's like it reaffirms your faith in humanity, in the sense that humanity is the providence of this non-natural gift, which is the gift of the ability to conquer one's circumstances.
Right.
To be in control of one's circumstances.
Right, and just the gift of creativity that you can infinitely create these ideas, and you can take them from your own subjective universe and make them, concrete in the objective universe. It's very magical, and it's interesting how people don't see it that way. You tell them that that's magic, and they're like, oh, okay, people want that Harry Potter or hocus pocusery,
Right.
But I always explain to people, well, what's with this magic? What are you talking about? I mean, I always give the example of, creating, we're both musicians. We talk about being able to hand somebody like a compact disc or a vinyl LP or a download card, or point somebody to your website. You basically start with this blank palette. You've had this idea, you create an objective, and then almost like in this Fibonacci sequence, it just unravels and unfolds like in the snowball effect. The next thing you know, you got a band together and you're composing music and you're recording it, and then you're giving things names, and you have themes that you're working with, and you get artwork done, and then you have like this grand piece of art that you can hand somebody. And that, it all started with this spark, and you had this gift of creativity, and you can actually put something together that's dynamic and, really illustrates the work that you do, and share that. And then, people can like it or dislike it, but you can get a reaction out of them. And then that creates a whole other alchemy of work. And then you may influence people to do their own work. And then once again, you have another snowballing emergence that happens from there. So it's fantastic. And to me, that's like the easiest way to explain the magical arts.
Yeah. So now you're making me think of Jack Parsons. Have you seen that series that's on that CBS series on Jack Parsons?
No, I have heard about that, and that definitely piqued my interest.
Oh my God, it's pretty intense. But I mean, that's an amazing thing right there. That this guy who basically, I mean, everything that we're talking about right now, seeing rockets, maybe Elon Musk going to go to the moon, rockets going into space. This is all because of this one guy. Like, just believed in this thing so much. I wanted to do this so badly, was just obsessed with it. that he, you know, created rocket fuel. And all the time he's like getting his ideas and inspiration from the esoteric philosophy of Aleister Crowley and the idea of do what thou wilt, and that human will, you know, which is a providence of the gift of Set, that human will has the ability to accomplish these things.
Right. And people take a negative connotation that, you know, do what thou will. And the first thing people think of when especially when I have these conversations with maybe non-initiates or people that follow a different path, is like, well, when you say do what thou will, they take the connotation that you're taking from them. And it's not that. It's that you have the ability of your own desire and passions to seek that you want to seek, and become a master of your own domain. You know, practice and learn and better yourself and mindfully evolve. And from that, you can put your work into the world and make it a better place.
No, absolutely. So that's the idea. That's the myth of the zero-sum game, is what that is. It's like people, there's this idea out there that the only way that you can accomplish anything is by that you can gain anything is by taking it away from someone else. Like there's a finite amount of whatever it is we're talking about, resources, the ability to accomplish. Right. There's a finite amount of, like, you know, human ingenuity, you know, in the universe. And that if you're going to do it, then you got to take it away from like someone else, which, I mean, I think that's a fundamental idea in Thelema. You know, and the idea in Aleister Crowley's concept of do what thou wilt is that, no, it's not a zero-sum game. That you
exactly.
Right, that's part of your universal, you know, it's part of like how the universe, like how you fell in the universe, how you were created here, is that you can have infinite will within yourself, and there's enough space for all of us. It's the same way, and he did this, he had this analogy of every man and every woman is a star. Right, and this is the idea of like, you know, all the stars in the universe. There's enough room for them all. They're not like fighting with each other. You know, they're not taking advantage of each other.
Right, because it's constantly expanding, and there's more than enough room. And it's almost like, you know, we're like Tesla trying to create this infinite energy. I mean, when you're creating, especially with your own subjective universe, it's your space, and creation is infinite, right? But if you destroy, you could potentially destroy everything, but when you create, it's kind of just this endless, you know, open vastness that you can just keep giving to the universe.
Yeah,
your thoughts and your actions.
Absolutely. So okay, so we went all the way out to the moon and the universe and everything. So let's like come back. Let's come on back to Earth for a minute. So let's talk about how did you find the left-hand path? How did you get introduced to all these intense cosmic ideas?
Let's say at a very early age. I was thinking about this the other day. I was joking with some friends, you know, like about when you're a child, your parents always want to put you to bed early, and you know, I have a sneaking suspicion it was more like they want to get on to their own nefarious activities. So it's like 7 o'clock at night in the summer and the sun's still on. It's like, all right, it's time to go to bed. You're a kid, right?
Right.
But what happens is you might not be tired. So you end up, I remember as a kid, I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I would be struck with, you know, you had all this activity all day and all these things going on, you know, sounds and colors, and you're constantly getting all this, all these filters going through. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and it's just dark and silent. And I remember laying in bed and just feeling that stillness and that darkness, but also perceiving that there's something more going on than just what I'm seeing here in this one possible dimension. And I couldn't really put my finger on it, but no one had told me yet that this does or does not exist, these thoughts and actions. And then, you know, the dream work that you have as a child, you know, it's almost like you can't differentiate what's reality and what's not, because they're so vivid and you don't really understand the concept of dreams at that point. And I had certain dreams, you know, you have those floating dreams and you kind of wonder what that is. And then you get older and you start looking into it and you're like, wow, was I like, you know, doing an astral projection or something like that? So that type of thing resonated with me. And being outside, I think I had initially started more in like an earth-based kind of system that I could just feel my connection, you know, to the sun and the earth, and started looking more into Wiccan type of things. I actually belonged to like the seminary of Wicca at one point, like Nashua, But I think what kind of changed things for me was actually Slayer's Rain and Blood album came out, and I purchased that, and I listened to it. And it's just 28, 30 minutes of just straight musical decimation. And something happened when I listened to that, and it wasn't just the imagery of, you know, the Prince of Darkness on the cover or anything like that. It struck a chord within me, and I was trying to figure out, like, what is this? And as this Kundalini kind of just came into being and just swirled throughout my being, and it's this feeling of potent power that I was almost invincible or could do anything, and I wanted to tap into that. So kind of essentially chasing that feeling, but also how do you get there? Obviously, I put this record on, I listened to it, and it changed my thought, and I became a musician. But I also started to think that emergent quality of that, when you write something and you create something, you can actually change the emotions of others, and even in a certain area. And the magic of that, you could get an argument with somebody, have a heated argument, and leave. And if somebody came in 5 minutes later, they can feel the tension. So there's a lot going on that's just not visible, and it's a mysterious factor for me. So what I started to see, it started a little bit with the imagery, maybe of the left-hand path, but it also seemed like it was a no BS kind of take on things. Certainly Anton LaVey's work resonated with me early on. It was very cut and dry and concise, and I think even to this day, I try to take out the esoteric hogwash in magic. Crowley's book 4 was very influential for my work as far as like magical weapons and certain meditation techniques. But I found, you know, a good percentage of the books that I read just, you know, was a little dense and or purposefully trying to mislead here and there. So I found the work of Anton LaVey, and then later on, you know, Peter Carroll and the chaos magic to be just very to the point, you know, creating sigils, force fields, stuff that were practical, you know. And what I found throughout magic was that you have to put your own time and effort and energy, willpower, and practice into it. And then, you know, when you do what we call magical working, especially in the temple, you're really just being able to crystallize that thought, right? And it adds a percentage factor to your success. But really, the work's being done out in the field. And I think what the armchair magicians kind of miss on that point is they think that, you know, if you follow the blueprint of what somebody else wrote in a book, A through F, you can just sit down in your parents' basement and you're going to get all these rewards. And that's just not how things work. So I found the left-hand path to kind of just be the most straightforward way to be able to succeed in what your will was, making change in accordance with will. Yeah,
totally. And, you know, man, you mentioned like Slayer, Rain and Blood. I mean, that's like such a huge thing right there. And there's just like something about it, you know. It's like Slayer, like none of their none of their albums after that ever, like, even though they're like better production, I'm sure they're technically better musicians and everything, there's just some essence in that album that is just indescribable, and no one else has ever been able to do, in my opinion, anything like that. You know, it's just like all my whole experience of metal after that has always been, it's always in comparison to Slayer, Rain and Blood, you know.
Right. And it evokes this primal feeling like within, and it's kind of scary too, right? And but it's worth exploring. And they're like, why does this make me feel this certain way? But at the same point, very potent, and it's
yeah. Even though I mean, there's nothing like, I mean, it's all just, the imagery is just all, you know, it's all hell and violence and you know, altar of sacrifice and all of this stuff, and it's not like highly enlightened as far as like, you know, if you just took out the lyrical content and stuff and you just like read the lyrics on it, it doesn't seem like there's anything that incredibly enlightening in it. But all put together as a whole, it's like the experience of it is just something like really, really amazing. And so, I mean, your whole narrative though is just right on key with the idea of being a left-hand path magician is just intimately tied in with being a left-hand path musician. Like for myself, I can't separate the two. When I think about my story and how I found the left-hand path. I can't separate music out of it. And I think I've told you before, we had a long discussion at one point about the Ozzy Osbourne album.
Speak of the Devil.
Yeah, Speak of the Devil, that's it. The live album that's so hard to find now. And I was a kid and I saw that album, and it's like, he's like, spitting out a bunch of jelly or something.
Jelly,
yeah, red jello on the cover. There's runes around it and everything, and I'm like,
and that's one of the mysterious things also. It's got the runes on it, and you're kind of like, you look at it, I don't know what age you were when you discovered it. I mean, I was like the early 80s. I was, very young, but I remember my brother got that album. I was like, what is this? Right? It's just like something spoke to me about the runes at that time even, but I couldn't quite decipher what they meant. But obviously I could tell that when I looked at the actual form that it resonated something with me, and would later on prove, very valuable to work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that album, when I encountered it, it was the first album I encountered that was forbidden. You know what I mean? It was like, everything else I'd listened to, and I was like, I don't know, like 12 years old, 13 years old or something like that in the early 80s. And, everything I'd listened to up until that point had been stuff that you could find on the radio somewhere. But none of that stuff. I mean, now you hear Black Sabbath stuff on the radio. You hear that on the radio. But at the time where I was, you did not hear any of that stuff on the radio at all.
No.
Right. And it's like, so that album was, and I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have any other friends, who were like into this stuff. So it was like, I found it. I got it through like the Columbia Record and Tape Club, I think. And I'm like, I got that. I looked at it. I'm like, this is like forbidden, It's like the forbidden treasure.
Right, and that's a key aspect also of our work in Left Hand Path is the practice of rebellion, right? Mm-hmm. That antinomian aspect that you just don't find in any other philosophy or religion, and the ability and the allowance of yourself to be able to say, hey, I can do this. There may be some rules and regulations that somebody else adhere to, but I can create my own personal ethics and do what thou will, without having to be a negative connotation to somebody else, but working within your own space, that you can make your own decisions, that you have the right to make your own decisions. And if you even look at the classical sense of the Prince of Darkness stepping away from the group mentality and giving the right to others to be able to think for themselves, that's really like the key dynamic of sentience and being able to be an isolate intelligence,
right,
and be creative. Be the adversary.
Exactly. And the other thing is you have to learn to separate the essence of that principle of antinomianism, to separate it away from the mainstream judgment of it, because the mainstream always portrays these things. And I'm talking about music and movies too, film. It always portrays these things in a it always portrays antinomianism in a violent, sort of like conflictual, like actually like real evil, kind of way, like all the great movies, The Omen and stuff like that.
Right.
Rosemary's Baby. Well, there's always this this murder thing and violence thing that's thrown into it. And it's you have to learn how to separate the principle of antinomianism, which is actually the principle of individuality and entrepreneurialism and all these other things. Separate that from the propaganda that gets that the mainstream tries to attach to it.
Right. And if you think about it, when you're trying to be a dictator, you don't want others to be able to think for themselves, right? And I think it's a scary thought to those that seek power, especially power over others, that people have the right to choose to do what they want in their lives and follow their own passions and dreams. You'd rather the person just, come home and maybe be locked in, drinking every night, watching, network television. I mean, that's a safe way to keep people controlled, right? And it's the thought that people can actually create and follow their own, perceived destiny. It's a scary thought for those that want to be at the top of the food chain and control others.
Yep, absolutely.
Which a lot of mainstream religions have tried to do.
No, definitely. It's just the mainstream religions are the most obvious iteration of a central authoritarian control structure.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your music. So what's your End-Time Illusion? That's the main thing that I've heard from you. I saw the videos that you got on YouTube and stuff. So how do you incorporate, or do you incorporate these ideas into your music?
Well, at this point, I'm the OG of End-Time Illusion. So I basically write all the music. I do have a writing partner, Adam, who creates the lyrics. And the great thing about the band is that I can create these pieces of music and have a central theme and a vision. And I was just telling somebody the other day, kind of like I have this synesthesia where I write in color. Like every song's kind of color coded by some certain emotion. But then I can also share that with somebody in the band, like the lyricist, and then he can take his own take on it and go in another direction. So you get the kind of this quantum variation that makes it very dynamic, where he has his own vision for the song and I have my initial vision, but you can have both at the same time. So it's, very spectrum related, where you can see different aspects of it. But I've been able to tackle a lot of my initiatory subjects with the music. In fact, Dee Dee's at War, our last album, was part of a series that I was doing called Die Cursus Initium, which I translate in my Davism version of Latin as my path of initiation. And what I put are these 9 songs, I call them Conceptus Novum, which is just 9 different facets of my initiation and the construction of a magician and what you perceive and encounter along your own initiatory path. So it was very fulfilling to put that last album out. It was about maybe a 5-year process, just from general concepts to writing and recording and actually getting it out, and then doing some eventual tours.
And you play the guitar, right?
Right. I play guitar. Some of the stuff I've recorded and or played the bass. I have a drummer in the band, different from the person that recorded that album. But yeah, right now we're a 4-piece, 1 guitar, bass, vocals, and drums. We did do a tour, West Coast tour, this last summer, and it's also a magic of being able to actually do things in 2018 is that none of us live in the same state. I live in Connecticut. Our drummer's in Manhattan, New York. Adam, my singer, is in Framingham, Mass, and then our bass player lives out in San Francisco. But yet we can all use technology and share, the music and ideas and the notation, through the internet, and still come together and play as one when we need to.
That's amazing. That's an amazing usage of resources to pull all of that together. And I mean, I've always been like really just blown away whenever I hear your stuff. I mean, your musicianship, my friend, is quite extraordinary. So can you share a little bit about how you came to be in that situation? Have you always played? Did you start playing when you were real young?
My mom was a hippie and she was into like Hendrix. So when I grew up, I became obsessed with the guitar, and I remember asking for a guitar, and I think they had bought me one of these like plastic Kiss guitars, and I think emulating Jimi Hendrix, I smashed it within 24 hours.
Oh my God. That's
so
awesome.
When I was like, hey, I want like a real guitar, they're like, yeah, I don't think so. So it probably took, until the age of 11, I think I got my first actual guitar. But, the technical aptitude of the shredder of the 80s very, stood out to me. I mean, it's just something about hearing, minor scales ripped, at 200 BPM plus, just, and presto on the metronome just really resonated with me. That said, it's a initiation in itself to learn how to play and get the technical and physical parts down, as well as the mental discipline to be able to practice. I know a Setian favorite book in the temple is Mastery by George Leonard. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I like that book is that you can't ever pass over your fundamentals. And, you can listen to End-Time Illusion and be like, wow, how are they playing that fast? But although we've been able to get to that level, whether it's the drums or the guitar, you have to practice fundamentals. And I find that even in any, discipline, whether it's martial arts, creative arts, what have you. You got to have that core base of fundamentals, and that's something I try to work with, on a daily basis. When I pick up the guitar, it's not like I'm just, ripping, through these songs. You got to warm up, and you got to pay attention to your body, and how do you get into that state of mind where you can actually get to that level of proficiency.
So do you ever sit around like with your guitar, like just jamming on it, sitting around on the couch and the TV's on, and you just like try and like play the song, whatever like music is going on television at any given time, try and play along with it?
Oh yeah, I used to annoy people all the time. I'd be playing, hey, here's the theme from Three's Company or Beavis and Butthead or whatever. But that, it's a key part of being a musician is just, hearing things and translating them to your guitar. So it's fun. You gotta have fun with it too. It can't just be all work, essentially.
Yeah.
But no, it's great. I mean, you can meditate. Sometimes in a lot of the music even written on my solo album, we're just, I could be out mowing the lawn and like I could see something or hear something, and all of a sudden like I hear a certain melody, and I just run inside and I start playing guitar, and like within 10 minutes I've written like this new piece, and I'll make a demo of it, and then I may go back to it next week, or it could be like a year, and the next thing you know, you can hear all the layers on the album. I may add orchestration or things like that, but it all started from like just one spark or idea. And sometimes I actually write like in reverse, where if you were writing like a jingle for TV or something, you were given the objective right off the bat, like, hey, we're trying to sell, toothpaste here, write a jingle for it, right? And that's kind of dry and lame. Or you could say, hey, I just broke up with my partner, I'm feeling kind of down, I'm going to write a blues song. What I typically find is that I just have a certain emotion, I let my fingers dance on the fretboard, figure something out, and then it's almost like a week or a month or a year later that I start to think like, wow, this song really resonates with this certain topic or experience that I've had in my life. So it's almost like the reverse. Rather than starting with the initial thought or objective and then writing the music, sometimes I just write the music. I call it this noetic dispersion, where you just have this flash, and it's almost like an aspect of automatic writing, right? You just like your hand just kind of finds its way, and you just write something, and you're like, I don't know where that came from or what it means right now, but I like it, and I'm gonna shelve it, put it in my my vault of music, and then at some point it just kind of resonates a certain idea, and you can articulate a certain theme or an experience that you had in your life, and it all kind of comes together.
So what is your theory on naming a song? Like, at what point in the process do you say, here's the name of the song, and then you work from there?
It's to be honest, it's usually at the last thing. Sometimes an End-Time Illusion, I've come to my singer Adam and said, hey, I had a song, and I was like, dude, this song is about X, and it's got this title. Like, one song in particular was the Veil of Negative The Veil of Negative Existence. Something like just stuck with me, and it was basically a song that I had written about the peaks and valleys of initiation. And that's one of the concepts that I work with, is that we always seek to improve, and we always wish to improve. But what happens when you plateau? I mean, it could happen in the gym, it can happen on guitar, it could happen in your professional life. Not everything is not going to be like a linear bar graph to the top, right? I mean, you're going to have these peaks and valleys where you fail and you learn from failing and you better yourself, but you're not always going to win. So I thought that was kind of a cool concept for the song, and it kind of just went, I wrote it like in C minor, and it just had like that feel to it. So, Adam's like, oh, that's cool, let's write around that. And he penned out the lyrics, or sometimes say, hey, this is what I'm thinking for this song. Or he might say, hey, I listened to this music that you wrote, and this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going to write about. I'm like, hey, you hit it on the head, or, we'll just go with that. So it's usually the naming convention usually comes towards the end of the process.
Or at the point where you're communicating with your other collaborators.
Exactly. What I try not to do, especially in the band situation, is be the dictator where like, hey, this is the music, and this is what you're going to write about, and play it like this. I mean, I have my ideas. I mean, I'm a percussionist by heart. I feel like an internal beat. So drummers that I've worked with, I said, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And then if they come up with something, I say, hey, go with that. I'm always I always promote everybody's own contribution and thoughts. And I've had songs kick back to me where like, dude, we're not feeling it. I said, you know what, I'll just shelve it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, if the other people aren't feeling it, that probably means a lot of other people might not be feeling it. And maybe it's just, it's not good. certainly quality over quantity. I respect the fact that we can write as individuals and having that gift, but you also got to know where to cut it off. You know, I had a singer that I worked with, and he used to brag to me, dude, I write 10 songs every day. And I'm thinking like, well, yeah, like a quarter of one of those songs is really catchy and good. The other 95% of what you wrote is kind of garbage, you know?
Right.
So there has to be a filter. And it's up to you also. It's a personal, gauge that you have, but I try to be very, constructive and take constructive feedback and, allow for that organic process to work with a team and, create the best product. But it all starts with what you enjoy and what you like first. I mean, if people want to come along for the ride and they enjoy it also, that's great. If not, we're really into it for ourselves, number one.
Yeah. No, I agree, and everything you say like really illustrates the fact that collaborators are really important for finding, what's really, what the good stuff really is. Like I say, you got to have some throwaway songs. You got to like, if you're going to do an album, you need to like come up with like 15 or so songs and throw away like, at least like 5 of them, before you like get to an album stage with it.
Right, and that even just happened. We have a new End-Time Illusion album that we're in the mixing stages on. I told Adam the other day. I said, you know what? We have this one song. I ain't feeling it. It's like it just doesn't fit the other songs. I put everything into like a flow and how all the different pieces kind of come together. And the interesting thing is I had like a running order of tracks for probably a year, and then once the other tracks are coming along, we put some orchestration over it. I decided, the song that I had like as the 5th song on the album is probably going to be now the 1st song on the album, and you're constantly mixing and, as I like to say, birthing the initiatory baby, right? So you have this idea and you're so close, and at some point you just basically got to, get it out and just cut the umbilical cord and put it out in the world. And so we're getting to that stage right now. But as that's, we're so close and like the 8th month here, basically of this birthing of this initiatory idea, it's like, okay, I think we need to like, addition by subtraction and, maybe just put the best quality out and maybe cut the fat off a little bit, right?
Right. And so the last album is Deities at War, right?
Yes.
And when did that come out?
2015. And we did a self-release on it. We had put the first 2 albums out on an independent label, and we couldn't find any, I guess, deal that made sense. I mean, and it's, it's a product of the industry these days. I mean, people just basically put music out to kind of get out on the road. And if you're even a part-time to a full-time musician, you're going to make your money mostly with merchandise on the road and playing out live shows. That's just the nature of the beast in 2018. So when I looked at talking with, labels and people that could promote and distribute, it was basically like having to hand over everything, right? And I think the most important thing, and I think Adam would agree in the band, is that we own the rights to our own music because it's so personal. Mm-hmm. And the thought of just passing over the publishing and the copyright, which most of the companies want because they want to make something off of it. Mm-hmm. We just decided to self-release and, be true independents and do things our own way.
Well, the other thing that can happen is they can take those rights, and even if they don't even make money off of it, still they are going to prevent you from being able to make money off of it.
Exactly.
Right. So
there's enough, and you can make enough connections now where you have like Music Taxi and these other industry companies that you can send and, put your music in and possibly get on soundtracks and what have you, if that's what you want to do with it. So
yeah,
there's more than enough avenues there. And I think we've kind of agreed, even internally in the band, we like the mysterious nature of the band. I don't, see us being this commercial powerhouse in the metal community. It's kind of like, back in the day, when we grew up, like in the 80s, you didn't really see and hear a lot about some bands. I mean, they might come on tour here and there, but the only thing you had was that album to look at a picture of them. And you couldn't go on the internet and see all these obscure videos and things. It was a treat just to be able to find any like news article like in a magazine or something. So I kind of almost want to go back to that, where it's more like this mysterious kind of nature surrounding the band.
Right, where you have to dig for it. Where people, if you're going to have fans for it, there are people that have to dig for it, if they want to.
Exactly.
So tell me about you. You went on tour for this album recently, right?
Yeah, so we were able to go out for 11 days, 8 dates throughout California, Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona. And it was a lot of driving, but um, I'd even mentioned to you maybe previous to this podcast that it's the whole experience, right? It's the, getting in the van, those times, you got a 6 hour drive through a desert with your buddies, and you're talking about life and your own initiations, and the conversations just spark ideas that are material for more music or just enlightening aspects. Meeting new people. There's this emergent quality that we notice at every show that we might turn up at a venue, might be a dive bar, there may only be 50 people there. Maybe the attendance isn't the greatest, but you hit that first chord, and we would just create what I called, the Electric Ritual Roadshow, where, the lights go off and we just put the show on, and there's like this electric energy in the air, and everybody becomes one. It's like this unity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, metal's known for that kind of tribal feeling of everybody being one, but you have a room full of individuals, and for like a half an hour, everybody's just like in tune as like one. It's like this unity together, this brother and sisterhood, and everybody's just vibing. I mean, we were looking out the stage. I mean, the sound guys were like coming out behind the board and throwing down in the pit, and bartenders are just like screaming for more. And it was just like a thrilling electric energy. It was magic. It was just great. This chamber that we were creating. It's just fun meeting new people and sharing that experience with them, and that's the best part about being on the road and just seeing new locations and different climates. And we were able to go to like the Redwood Forest, Elk Prairie. We spent some time in San Fran, got burnt in the sun in Arizona, went to Carlsbad, California, went to Vegas, got to spend some time at the Luxor, and we're in a pyramid. And interestingly enough, in the pyramid, there's a ziggurat in the pyramid. I mean, it's just very good visual and entertaining experiences.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. There's nothing else like it. When you mention the driving across the desert, talking to your buddies in the van, that's like your tribe, and
Exactly.
some of my fondest memories are during the times in my life when I was doing that, touring with my band and just sitting up late, like trying to get to the next gig and having these conversations, because you're basically, I was just talking about this with on the last show with Christoph Bathory from Dawn of Ashes, about how like the show is basically a ceremony. You're basically a live show from the point of view of the musician who's like the creator of this, actively engaged in it. It's basically a magical ceremony. And when you're on tour, you're basically doing a magical ceremony every night with a new group of people who are there, who willfully, even if it doesn't matter how big the crowd is, everyone who's there wants to be involved in it, right? They're all there to be involved in this. And so that, I mean, after doing this, 3, 4, 5 nights in a row or maybe more, you start to get into a different state of consciousness with it.
Certainly. And like time doesn't, you don't even recognize a clock anymore. And I've always talked about that too. I mean, I have a great profession and everything, but you eat when you want to eat, you sleep when you want to sleep, and you just get into this, your own space of doing what you want when you want to do it. Obviously you got obligations at a time to be at the club and do the show, but on another hand, you just lose sight of the restrictive nature of trying to fit things in. Like, hey, if I got to eat, I have to eat between this time and this other time, because I got meetings and I got people I got to see and I got these responsibilities. And when your responsibility is just showing up at a venue in a different state and rocking out in this created magical chamber, it's very enlightening.
It is very enlightening. So you got a new album you're working on?
Yeah, so we tried to work with different concepts, and did this one. It's going to be interesting. The working title right now is Anamnesis Genesis. So it's basically a focus on self-remembering and what's the spark of that. Like Carl Jung talked about, this collective consciousness, and it's something that's resonated with me for a long time, is that, in our DNA, do we have these coded memories? And it even goes to the fact, I like to use the analogy of, that we're organic computers, right? That our brains, or the mechanisms that we work these meat machines with, is like this hard drive. And I personally feel that we're embedded with so much software, and we're just trying to figure out how to like run it. And I think of the concept, like, if you gave like a 6-year-old kid a computer that was loaded with everything you could possibly have on it, you're like, here you go, kid. You're trying to, how is he going to get in there? You got passwords you got to get into. You got to figure out, instructions on how to use, something. I mean, even if you give an adult Adobe Illustrator, they're not going to create this like masterpiece off the top, right? They're going to have to learn how to use it. And I think that's kind of like the struggle and the mystery of life, is that we're trying to decode and relearn stuff that we already have inherently within ourselves. So we're kind of working with kind of a concept like that. Like, I mean, we have a lot going on and a lot of potential. It's just a matter of, we have where do you find the keys to unlock these doors? And every time you unlock a door and you walk through that into a new room, there's another room with a door. And how do you keep unlocking those and relearning? And I think, the Egyptians and other cultures kind of had that same feeling that we know, and there's like a self-remembering that can take place with the work that we do.
Absolutely. So I think that's like an idea from Plato too, that
Exactly.
that all knowledge is actually a form of remembering.
Right.
Because all of the knowledge is within us already.
Exactly. I mean, DNA in itself is just a peculiar thing, and you can go to the conspiracy route of ancient aliens and how we've been toyed with and what have you, but there's certainly something that sets us apart from other forms of life, and that even goes with that frame of consciousness and having the gift to be able to create and things like that. So that self-remembering, it's just an interesting concept, and we're kind of placing that in some of the song working titles that we have on the album. So I'm excited about it. Happy with the music. A little more open. There's a little like black metal influence, and there's just some old thrash, on the album, and it's gonna be a fun album.
Sweet. So would you? So that brings up a good question. So how would you classify the music of End-Time Illusion? I heard it. I thought death metal.
Yeah, and we had a long discussion on tour about that, where we may have like almost like set ourselves back from maybe some potential opportunities over the course of the years, because we don't really identify or pigeonhole ourselves with any form of metal. I mean, when you talk death metal or deathcore or black metal, these are like very strong contingents and genres or subgenres and within metal, and a lot of people stick together in it. And we've always just said we play metal because, I mean, my influences are broad, from Black Sabbath to Venom to Morbid Angel to I love jazz. I like all forms of music. I'll even listen to old school rap. Not that necessarily gets into End-Time Illusion stuff, but I'm very broad, and I like everything, and I don't really feel like I have to write in any specific mode. Or if I write a riff that I like, I'm not gonna say, well, it doesn't really fit End-Time Illusion. I say, how can I make this fit into End-Time Illusion? So I say we kind of play technical metal, although some of the newer stuff's a little bit more open. There's even some like kind of like southern metal kind of like riffs on the album, more obscure stuff. But yeah, I guess when you listen to it, I may have sent you some links, like the song "Deities at War," or the Dissenter off "Deities at War." I mean, it very much would go into like the death metal category. But I come from the actual original death metal scene in the early '90s, and back then it was like gore and Satan lyrics and this, that, or the other. And maybe that's definitely changed and become more broad over the last 25 plus years. But like I said, it's hard to pin it down because I don't want to pigeonhole us in any genre or subgenre. But I would say if you listen to us, yeah, I could see death metal. But like I said, I'd probably just say we're technical metal.
Yeah, no, it's I hear all of that. So it's definitely like really extreme stuff and very technically all very profound and real heavy. So genres are just crazy like that. You know what I mean? It's like it's so hard trying to deal with genres. I hated dealing with genres. I hate even like talking about them. Right. But ultimately you have to. It's like you have to eventually like name the song so the other guys in the band will be able to know which song it is we're going to do next. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to pigeonhole it then, you have to tie it down to something so other people can latch on to it. But you just reminded me when you mentioned like old school rap. Didn't we do a karaoke of old school rap in
Yeah,
Hawaii? Well,
yeah. I think you hit up Gin and Juice, and I did It's Tricky from Run DMC.
that's right. I remember. It's all coming back to me.
Oh yeah. No, it's good stuff, man. It's fun. I mean, to me, music's all about, creating an emotion within, man. And it's like, on one hand, when you're playing like that total dark, death metal stuff, and you can get into that vibe where I wouldn't say it's negative, but it's just this potent, dark feeling. But then, I like party stuff, man. I like 70s funk. I like feeling happy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being happy and feeling love, and Left Hand Path doesn't have to be, you walk around all looking goth and, look like you're pissed off all the time. And I think that's just that superficial, preconceived thing that's pushed on Left Hand Pathers, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. No, it's all about it's about being happy all the time.
Exactly.
It's about feeling real love all the time,
Exactly. And even when I talk about with people, the Prince of Darkness, who creates the imagery? It's usually the opposers or the adversaries to those that are able to create. So the devil's always perceived as like a goof. You look at Saturday Night Live, and I think like John Lovett's on like the People's Court. He's like the silly devil. Or you have the goat, the Baphomet kind of like look. And to me, it's more like, I remember like the movie Fright Night. It's like the evil guy in the movie is like this debonair, kind of guy. He's like the classy guy, and I see myself more in like a sports coat than I do necessarily like blood and fangs, right?
Right. Absolutely, 100%. So, what do you think about these days? There's so much left-hand path symbolism creeping its way into the mainstream. You know what I'm talking about? It's like I can get, everyone's wearing Baphomet shirts now. I mean, back in my day, it was a big deal to even find a Baphomet shirt was hard.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's, on one hand, it's kind of cool, but then it's also a little corny too. And I think, especially the pentagram. I mean, it's like, God, like, can you guys be any more original? It's like every like metal band that comes out now, it's like, if we put a pentagram on this, we're in, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know what the thought process is, but that's one thing I like about the Temple of Set is that the intrinsic nature and the way we perceive the Pythagorean symbol, having this quality of the golden mean, people don't get that. They just look at the shock value, and I guess like a Marilyn Manson or maybe like some black metal bands and things like that, and if they're using like a pentagram or an upside down cross, it's a shock value thing. I think it's worn off at this point. I mean, it's 2018. Things have been used like over and over again, but I can look at the simple lines of the inverse pentagram, and I see more than that. I see, like I said, the unlocking of the quest of perfection and the value in our initiations and things like that, and which is remiss, I believe, with most of the population that use these type of symbolism.
Mm-hmm. So what about you have a book project too going on, right?
Correct. So part of that initiation in music work, I was the director of the Black Muse element, which I'd taken over from some other fine initiates in the temple. And I'd done some writings for the Scroll of Set over the years, and just my own personal work, especially with an End-Time Illusion. So I basically break down my work into one sigil, and it's kind of hard to really construct all these ideas down to like a finer concept. And what I break it down to, and the working title for the book is going to be Die Musicon, which is the Musicon, which is a sigil that I put together, which is the Berkano rune, a quarter note, and the Waz scepter.
Mm-hmm.
And what that speaks to me is, from Berkano, what we have is the process of coming to life, that big bang, that imagination from our Noatia. This fertile ground's been planted, and we sprout this new creation, and we're feeding this mental landscape of experience and influence in our study and practice. And the quarter note, representative of that driving beat, right? The heartbeat of our work, bringing art to life and sustaining it. But you really need to be in control of what you do create. And the Waz scepter having that dominion aspect over what our work and also the power and protection. We got to protect our work. We got to put out that quality over quantity when we put it into the universe. So I kind of fused all these symbols together, and I call it the musicon. And people are like, musicon, that's kind of a weird term. What does that mean? And I'm like, in my school of being concise, it's just music icon. Nothing too mysterious about it. But so the book's going to be brought, basically a bunch of essays that I had put together over the last 9 years. One of those is a big section on attunement, some work that I do using work to kind of align power points in the body. Also, I guess like the Voces Magica, or words of power from the Greek magical papyri. But then also the 9 songs off of Deities at War, I'd broken down to these 9 concepts. So I have a pretty good working draft right now, kind of in the editing phase. And I hope to get something more concrete together by 2019.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, the problem is working on so many projects at once. It's like, it's tough. You want to spend time practicing, like I said, the fundamentals so you can keep up with what you're working on. But it's hard not to not be writing. I feel like I'm always writing something,
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And it totally makes sense to have like multiple projects like that. Because we were talking about that earlier, like how like your work can plateau. You could reach a point where you plateaued with something. And so sometimes you just need to leave something there for a while and you switch to another line of work. So, you have like music, you have your literature, and I'm sure you have like other lines of work also in your life that you can like, bounce back and forth to as your life circumstances dictate.
Right. In this book, it's going to be a book on the music magic connection, but it's really about like, I guess, how do you create your own brand and you create the person that you are now? There's a lot of what I call replication going on like in the music industry, but the first concept that I worked with is really the construction. How do you construct your own brand, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes with my other company that I put together, Inversity, which we could talk about as well, is that certainly you're made up of all your influences, but at some point you're outputting this work that's uniquely your own. And I like to use, from a non-natural concept, styrofoam, for example, it's something that's, you don't find it naturally in the earth. You had to put all these ingredients together to make it. It's very non-natural. And if you find it in a landfill, it takes a while to decompose, and it's very useful, but then it could also be a deterrent to others. But then you look at like Coca-Cola as a brand, there's only one Coca-Cola, and then maybe they have these secret recipes, and you're going to have Pepsi and RC and all these, knockoff companies. But when something comes out that's like uniquely, innately original, there's only that one. And how do you create that for yourself? You're going to have these influences, you're going to have these ingredients in this vessel in this construction phase of your work. But the key is, how do you build up to having that unique essence and portraying that in your work?
Oh yeah.
So the book touches a little bit on that.
And it's the essence. That's like what makes it unique, I think, is that
exactly.
Because, with music, there's only so many notes, right? There's a finite amount of notes that exist in the scale. This is something that the KLF talked about this in the manual, that there's a finite amount of notes. But what makes a song unique, what makes the final product unique, is not so much the unique combination of notes, because it's always, it's actually similar things being used over and over again, but it's the essence of the people who put it together makes it original. Like somehow the creator's essence is somehow imbued into the work, and that's like what really gives it its uniqueness. That's what makes it individualistic, because it's the nature of essence. Exactly. Human essence is inherently individualistic.
And yeah, you can even have the same note, and it's how you see it. And the funny story on that is even the D sharp. I was telling somebody, I was like, I wrote my solo album. I tuned down a half step from standard pitch, which is E, to D sharp. So I was just like, hey, everything's in D sharp. And he's like, well, technically that's E flat. So if you're looking at the circle of fifths, it might be more standard, say E flat. And I'm like, well, D sharps, I guess it's enharmonic, if you were to speak in sharps, but obviously going with my name, it makes sense. So it's kind of funny. I'm looking at his D sharp. This guy's looking at his E flat. It's the same fucking note, but it's how you look at it, right, and how you perceive it. And that's part of the individuality of music, is that, you can it's up to you, right? It's your vision, right?
Absolutely. No, I always wondered about that. I mean, it's a D sharp and E flat. It's the same note, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's sharps and flats, and like it depends on what scale you're looking at. I mean, like I said, you might look at a standardized version that somebody came up in a framework that works, circle of fifths or something, and it's all flats and what have you, and that system works. But hey, you say tomato, I say tomato, whatever.
Right. It's all context.
Exactly.
Something like that. So that's really exciting, man. So looking forward to this book coming out. What about, you live in New England, right?
Yes.
So how's that?
Very unique area.
So how's that? Is there magic in New England?
I gotta tell you, it's great, and I appreciate it more and more the older that I get. And I grew up as a kid. I was like, I had these aspirations of going to LA and making it, and the West Coast and all that type of stuff. But the diversity that we have here, just the four seasons. I mean, you can go out on almost any block in any street and take a left-hand turn and get lost. And you just don't find that. Like, and it's no offense, like the Midwest, I've toured the Midwest, but I mean, you can look like 5 miles down one street dead straight, and it's just a flat, plateau. Yeah. And that's got its own magic in itself. But there's just something mysterious here in New England. I mean, just the makeup of it after the last ice age. I mean, you got boulders that were put in odd spaces. You got mountains, streams, ponds, rivers. You got the ocean. I mean, it's like a playground for everything. But historically, at least since the settlers have been here, I run the Starfire Pylon in Salem. You got the whole witchery around that. But I try to take it back even a little further and look at what's this primal energy that we feel here. And there's a very large Native American base prior to the settling. And I want to kind of tap into that. And I spent, a good year doing working at Native American shamanism in New England. And what it came down to is that the primal force or energy here was known as Habamak, which is, known as like this Native American devil. And kind of working with that energy. And what I suspected after working with that is that, the prince is known in many guises. It doesn't have to be Set or Satan or Baal or however you perceive it, or Votan. You can perceive this primal energy in a whole series of contexts depending on Aboriginal areas, natives, or time periods, right? Mm-hmm. So I try to draw upon that and so that's been great work. But also, the work we do in the pylon up here is try to travel around and make use of the time and space, whether it's working out in the woods and some type off of like a hiking trail, or some type of potent energy source such as Salem. I mean, modern Salem's like a good diverse ground for up and coming professionals, but great restaurants, and obviously the historical nature of great, buildings and establishments, and H.P. Lovecraftian tales and things like that. So quite a bit to work with here.
Yeah, when I was spending some more time out there a couple of years ago, and I think you and I met up once or twice there in Boston. But that whole part of the country is so Lovecraftian. That's what I think going around everything there reminds me of Lovecraft for some reason.
Right. And we were able to meet up one time in Providence, obviously very Lovecraftian spot.
Yeah.
But just the general makeup of New England, it's just there's just so much to work with here. And the interesting thing, you look at Lovecraft and you look at the stories, and okay, it might be a story. Some are based on maybe some hints of things that had happened historically and or data points. But you look at a system of magic that can even be created through that, and it's still potent. You can use these ancient one kind of names and implement them in magic systems, and it works somehow. It resonates, and it draws something from you.
Well, all right, man. So, I want to like make sure all of my listeners go out and check out End-Time Illusion. Where can we find you online?
www.endtimeillusion.com, but we have albums for sale on CD Baby. 3 full albums are available for download. And if you want to just check it out on YouTube, it's free. I'm more about just getting out there and being heard. So check out YouTube. I think we have all of our albums streaming for free there. We have a few videos that are out. So yeah.
Excellent. Awesome.
Check that out.
I know, and everyone needs to go like check out your music. You can find it really easily. Like search for End-Time Illusion on YouTube, and you'll find some badass videos there. And then we'll look for your book coming out too, man. Maybe you can come back when the book is out and talk to us again.
That'd be great. Yeah, I think 2019 is going to be a stellar year. The new End-Time Illusion album should hopefully be wrapped up, hitting the waves at that point. The book hopefully can get out. I should be on tour with Dead by Wednesday. We have an album coming out in 2019. I'll be touring the United States with them. So I always like to throw it out there where the locations are at and meet up with people and have some conversations. That's something I was able to do on the End-Time Illusion tour, meet up with some friends and meet new people. And that's what it's all about. Mouth to ear initiation, man. It's like online is great. Books are great, but there's nothing like having conversations, and even a podcast like this is great, but just being able to meet people face to face and pick up on people's energies and auras and share that energy for that time period. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely, man. You're right on the money there.
Yeah. Thank you for putting this together, man. I love your work. Getting the word out, the correct word out on the left-hand path. And I hope that this is like the alchemy that it spreads and people learn something from this conversation. Feel free to reach out to me and continue these discussions and enlightening ourselves and furthering our work.
All right. So, D, you want to tell us about this song we're about to check out?
Right. So the general concept for this song was having your own court. Like in ancient Egypt, the court of the Pharaoh would have been comprised of counselors. It was a place to deploy strategy, and you could also try those who would defame the throne, right? So taking on a modern approach, looking from a Setian aspect, we could look at our selected advisors in a royal network. So our inner court, sometimes you have to look at what's your core competency. So my core competency might be writing and playing guitar. My core competency is not recording music. So I have, an A-game player that can record music for me. I'd utilize him. He's in my court, right? If I'm trying to promote the album, I might use somebody that's, a master of marketing. So you put together this royal network, right, that you work with so you can focus on your own core competency. But also you're going to sometimes have, these enemies that are kind of working against you. So back in the day, you bring those people into the court of the Pharaoh and you build like a ring around them, and whoever would defame the throne have to pay the penalty. So the song kind of touches on those aspects, but also, being your own God and being able to make those decisions and being able to make things happen in your life. And A, push away the haters, but B, bring in the people that help you get your product out there and your art out into the world. So that is In the Court of the Pharaoh.
All right. Well, here it comes, In the Court of the Pharaoh. And as you all allow these vibrations to seep deeply into your being, remember to always keep the dark fires burning.
Fire existence, it's the morning of the world. Action existence until the last star falls from the night.